We're going over today System TES, Talmud Eser Sefirot, Part 1, Tzimtzum Restriction, and Kav Line, Inner Reflection, and we'll be going over Chapter 9 and 10. Here are the few concepts that we always go over. The rules to understand Talmud Eser Sefirot. So the first rule, when we're reading any Kabbalah material, we go over these various rules. The first rule is unnecessary is when we think that we're talking about reality. We make it necessary when we understand that we're actually talking about our perception of reality and our perception itself. And we have the second rule, which is impossible, is when we think that it's talking about the past, that all these states that we're talking about, that we think that they happened before we were born, and they don't. We make it possible by understanding it's talking about the future. These are states we actually go through. Secrets is when we think it's talking about others, either other people or a creature or whatever, and we disclose it when we understand it's talking about ourselves. So these are phases of perception in the future that we go through ourselves. And here are all the phases that we go through before the barrier. These are based on the 4 phases of direct light. So in phase 1, which is when we're born in reality, in our physical reality, and we go through various degrees of perception. We start with 1.1, which is unformed humanity, which are base desires for food, sex, and family, which are normally third world country desires. Then on top of that, we get 1.2, which is chaos humanity, which are business desires, which are desires for money, honor, and knowledge. If you get a passive point in the heart, that pushes you into 1.3, darkness humanity, where you start searching for religion or mysticism, or excessive traveling, you could say. 1.4, spiritual humanity, is when you find about Kabbalah. You have then you reach phase 2, which is the spiritual society, where you start with 2.1, unformed society, which is the desires for connection between people. 2.2, chaos society, which is desires for mutual guarantee. Then if you get your active point in the heart, you reach 2.3, the darkness society, when you feel the obstinate desires, which is the society limitations. Then you've got 2.4, spirit society, when you understand you have to start cleaning your concepts, that the problem wasn't that you weren't doing the right things. The problem is you didn't even understand what you need to do in the first place. You didn't understand what the concepts were. What is egoism? What is altruism? What is bestowal? What is the screen? And so forth. Then you reach the group phase, which is 3.1, which is called unformed group, where you have the correct goal of becoming the creator, not becoming like the creator. The difference is becoming like the creator means that you're wanting in the quality of reception to bestow, and becoming the creator means that you actually want to get the quality of bestowal itself, and receive the quality of bestowal. And you get focus on that. Then you have 3.2, which is chaos group, where you have to make the intellectual concepts that you were collecting in 2.4 to make them emotional. That's why it's called emotional concepts. If you get your intensive point in the heart, then you reach 3.3, darkness of the group, where you reach your pain point, which is basically you find out what is the point that is stopping you from crossing the barrier. And you're going to be using this point throughout, not just across the barrier, but all the way to end of correction. At end of correction, the pain point disappears and actually becomes a positive point. Then you reach 3.4, spirit group, which is anticipation, that you understand that you're going to be growing your ego in phase 4, and that's going to be the solution. It's going to give you the matter you need to actually desire spirituality. Then you reach phase 4, which is called the individual phase, where you have 4.1, which is the unformed individual, where you have doubts about the path. Why do I need to advance? What's the point? Is this really going to work? And so forth. Then 4.2, chaos individuals, when you reach responsibility over the entire world. So if you understand that all the world outside of you is a manifestation of you, therefore that people don't actually exist in themselves, rather each person is meant to see the whole world as a manifestation of themselves. Then you have 4.3, darkness individual, when you're understanding that you have no bestow at all, that the good deeds that you thought you had beforehand were just actions, they weren't states, and what you want is states and not actions. So you feel that vulnerable state that basically you don't have clothing, where clothing is actually called bestowal. So you feel naked. It means you feel the will to receive without a clothing of bestowal. The idea is you want to give up the fake clothes of bestowal, which are actions, and you want to get into states of bestowal. And then you don't have to run around doing good deeds. You can actually feel good in a state. You don't have to actually do anything. And then finally reach 4.4, the spirit individual, where after you've increased your ego throughout the whole phase 4, you activate the right line in that 4.4.2. And then if you've successfully done that, then you have a little fall at 4.4.3. And then the final phase before crossing the barrier, which is 4.4.4, is when you feel excitement and elevated state. Reality versus perception. So the idea is that normally when people teach Talmud as a Sefirot or any Kabbalah material, they normally teach that we came down from the boundless light, the Ein Sof, and we fell all the way down to this world. And they talk about reality. And they say that the way you advance is by going back up. We learn it here a little differently. The way we learn it is that you actually start in your perception at boundless light. So even though your reality is at the state of this world, the reason why you're suffering is because your perception is not aligned to this world. That is, you have the matter of this world, but you don't have the form of this world. And you have to actually build that form with details and discernments and coarseness. So the idea is you go from your perception, from boundless light, all the way to this world. And when you reach this world, that is called end of correction. So the idea is you're aligned between your perception and your reality. So we don't actually go back up to boundless light, we actually start from boundless light and reach this world.
You know, to me, that makes a lot of sense, too.
And then we have righteous versus wicked. The idea is that in wicked, it's when your vessels are not aligned to the light coming in. So for example, if you're expecting food and you're seeing a situation of tension, that is when the spiritual perception power, which is tension, is coming into corporeal vessel and you're expecting a situation of peace and you're actually feeling tension. That is called a state of wicked, since you're basically saying that the world as it is incorrect. And the same can happen where filling is coming in, for example, food, and you're expecting it to fill a spiritual gap, a spiritual emptiness. And that's what happens when people go into drugs or alcohol or excessive eating and so forth. And the idea is that you have to align the vessels to their fillings. So if a spiritual filling is coming in, which is normally tension, that's designed for your vessels of power, which are perception. And if a desire of filling of external filling is coming in, you're meant to align that to a corporeal desire. For example, food, sex, family, honor, knowledge, money, and so forth, which is the state of righteous, where the filling is for filling and the power is for power. Chapter 9. Change of form. Spiritual movement means renewal of Shinut Tzorah, change of form. Number 33. We should still scrutinize the meaning of time and movement that we come across in almost every word in this wisdom. Indeed, you should know that spiritual movement is not like tangible motion from one location to another. It refers to a renewed Tzorah form. We denominate every Chidush Tzorah, renewal form, by the title movement. It is that Chidush, renewal, meaning that Shinut Tzorah, change of form, that was renewed in the spiritual. Unlike its general preceding form, in that spiritual, it is regarded as having been divided and distanced from that spiritual. It is considered to have come out with its own name and authority, by which it became exactly like a corporeal essence that some part departed from and moved about to a different place. For that reason, the Chidush Tzorah, renewal form, is referred to as movement. Spiritual time means a certain number of renewals of Shinut Tzorah, change of form, that stem from one another. Former and latter means cause and consequence. So what it's talking about here, it's talking about what is spiritual movement and what is spiritual time. And the idea is that every time you go through a new state, the previous state still stays, and a new state is added, and that is called change of time. So the idea is if you are going, someone could be 50 years of physical time in a certain phase, and that's called no spiritual movement. While someone in a month could go through multiple spiritual movements. That means they're going through multiple phases. So even though the corporeal time, the physical time is small, the spiritual changes are large. The idea is that there's no actual connection between spiritual time and physical time. You could, in a small amount of physical time, do a lot of spiritual movement, which means going through new states, and you could have going through one state in a long physical time.
So what I'm hearing is that achishena, meaning hastening the times, is that the appropriate translation? Is that correct?
Hastening time, yes.
Right. So hastening time, meaning spiritual time, not corporeal time.
Exactly. The idea is that hastening time means going through many spiritual states in less corporeal time. So you could say it's detaching corporeal time from spiritual time. So, for example, people that think that the festivals, that by going through festivals, spiritual time is changing, that's a mistake. The idea is that you could go through 50 festivals and go through 0 spiritual changes, and you could go through one festival and go through multiple spiritual changes. There's no connection between spiritual and physical time. Spiritual time. 34. With respect to the spiritual definition of time, we must understand that time is essentially defined by us only as a sensation of movements. Our imagination pictures and devises a certain number of consecutive movements, which it discriminates one by one and translates them like a certain amount of time. Thus, if one had been in a state of complete rest with one's movement, he would not even be aware of the concept of time. So it is in spirituality. A certain amount of renewals of tzura form is considered spiritual movements. Those are intermingled in one another by way of cause and consequence, and they are called time and spirituality. Also, before and after are always referred to as cause and consequence. So that's basically what we talked about beforehand, that one of the things that actually happens when you advance spiritually is you feel like physical time has actually changed, but when you actually look at the clock, you suddenly see that not many time has passed. Like sometimes you can go through multiple spiritual states, and then you think that years have passed, and you look at the date, and you've only seen a few days have passed. So think of it as two cogs. You've got an internal cog of your spiritual time, and you've got an external cog of corporeal time, physical time. And the idea is that the internal cog can move much faster, and that's what you actually sense as time. So the idea is the internal cog of spirituality can be moving fast, and the corporeal cog of physical time is moving as it normally is, which is slow. And then the idea is you can feel like so much time has passed, but when you look back at the corporeal time, you see that not very much time has passed. And the opposite, one of the reasons why people feel that years go by in seconds is because they're actually feeling their spiritual time, which is seconds. And even though the corporeal time is 10 years, they're feeling it as if it was seconds. While the opposite happens with the Kabbalist, where they feel within seconds of corporeal time, they feel like years have gone by in spiritual time.
So what I'm taking from that is that the base unit of spiritual time is a change of stages. What's the base unit of corporeal time?
Base unit of, say that again?
What's the basic unit of corporeal time?
Corporeal time is basically we go by the sun and the moon.
Yeah, but the sun is a reflection of our inner self, so this is not the base unit. What's the base unit of the corporeal time? When I thought about it, and I thought about it in the past, what popped into my mind is, the time to make a discernment, something like that, or something that has to do with consciousness. Consciousness, by essence, it's what consciousness actually does is nothing else but discernment. So the time it takes a consciousness to make a discernment, that's the base unit of the corporeal time.
So the idea is that we talked about this in the article of Hastening Time, where it basically goes from physical time all the way to spiritual time. So physical time is the clock, right? The clock on the wall. That is, everyone experiences the same corporeal time. whether their mind works faster or slower. They always look at the clock and they say, a certain amount of time has passed. That's corporeal time. Then you have biological time, which is, the biological clock of our body, the growth of it. Some people grow faster, some people grow slower. That's called vegetative. So the first one is called still. Then you have animal, which is emotion, where you feel like that wasn't 5 minutes. Or when you say, wow, this lesson has been going on for years. And it's like, well, it's just 45 minutes, just like the lesson of yesterday. It's like, yeah, but this teacher is just so slow. It's like, it's still saying 45 minutes in corporeal time, but you're feeling emotionally as longer or shorter. And then you have the speaking time, which is discernments. And then finally you have spiritual time, which is changing of spiritual states, what it talks about here. So the idea is that the higher you move on this process to higher states of time, less physical time can go by and you can go through situations. That's why if someone's in a descent, they normally fall to the emotional time, and the idea is to move up to the discernment time and spiritual time. And then you actually advance. So you could say advancement is in the discernment and spiritual time, and if you're in the emotional or the biological or the physical time, it doesn't mean that you're advancing spiritually. And that's why we say in descents, it's not about staying in the emotion, it's about immediately shifting to the discernments, because you could be in that emotion for years and you will have zero spiritual movement. It's the discernment that moving forward, not the emotion. You're meant to feel the emotion for a moment and then move on, and then discern it from the side. There's no point staying in a descent for too long. Chapter 10. First form as substance. The entire substance that is ascribed to the Netzal emanated is the will to receive. Any addition in it is ascribed to the Matzil emanator. Number 35. Know that the distinguished will to receive in the Netzal emanated is his Kli vessel. Know also that it is the general substance that is ascribed to the Netzal emanated. It follows that the entire existence besides him is ascribed to the Matzil emanator. The will to receive is the first Tzurah form of every essence. We define the first Tzurah form as substance because we have no attainment in the essence. So basically it's saying in any time we're dealing with anything, we're always actually dealing with form. But the idea is that the first form we call it matter, and all the other forms we call them form. And the first paragraph is talking about the idea is that we said the will to receive is the matter of an individual, and the filling, the abundance, is ascribed to the Creator, to the will to bestow. So you've got a relationship between the will to receive and the will to bestow, where the will to bestow is that abundance or that power, and gives that filling to the will to receive. No attainment of the essence. Number 36. We perceive the will to receive as an incident, as a Tzurah form in the essence. Yet how do we perceive it as the substance of the essence? Indeed, it is the same with essences that are near us. It is our conduct to denominate the first Tzurah form in the essence by the name the first substance in the essence, because we have no attainment of perception whatsoever in any substance, as our five senses are completely unfit for it. The sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch offer the scrutinizing mind merely abstract forms of incidents of the essence, formulating through the cooperation with our senses. For example, if we take even the smallest microscopic atoms and the smallest elements of any essence, separated through a chemical process, they too would merely be abstract forms that appear that way to the eye. More accurately, they are distinguished and examined by the ways of the will to receive and be received that we find in them. We can utilize these operations to distinguish and separate the various atoms to the very first matter of that essence. However, even then, they would be no more than forces in the essence, not a substance. Thus you find that even in corporeality, we haven't any way by which to understand the first substance, except by assuming that the first Tzurah form is the first substance that carries all other incidents and forms that come afterwards. Indeed, it is all the more so in the upper worlds where tangible and fictional do not abide. The idea is that even in the corporeal world and even in the spiritual world, we're only always able to attain anything in our perception, which is a will to receive. The idea is that the will to receive is focus. So if I've got a perception on one thing and not another, that means that I had a will to receive on it. So the idea is that we never actually attain the essence, since to attain the essence would be to have the perception of everything, which you could also say is the perception of nothing. The idea is that we're always in our perception, and we're always attaining things through our will to receive. And therefore, the will to receive, which is our first form, you could say basically our desire, our perception, it's because it's our first form, we call it our matter. Any questions?
There's definitely something that I would need to read a few times. Very, very fine concepts.
It is, it's very important to understand that anything we can relate to is always going to be in our perception. And there's no point talking about things existing outside our perception. And people love to spend so much time talking about concepts existing as of themselves. And the idea is that there's just no point. There's an article in Shemati, number, I think it's 65, where it talks about that even the Torah, we don't actually attain the Torah itself, we attain what we attain from it, what we feel from it. So the idea is that, Torah is discernments. The idea is anything we're going to be reading, anything we're going to be seeing, we're always going to have our own unique approach to it. So there will be stuff that we're able to share with each other, and there will be a lot that we weren't able to share with each other. But the idea is to understand you're never going to be able to talk about something existing by itself. You're always going to talk about your perception of it. And it requires a higher ego to be able to do that focus.
I thought about it today, and I thought about a very simple proof, which is so simple it's almost annoying, why we are the creator. Because it says that whatever we don't attain, we don't give it a name and an appellation. So basically, we are nothing but a group of attainments. That's what we are. Within those attainments, at a certain time, after you cross the barrier, you would start attaining what you call the creator. But even then, the creator is nothing but a group of discernments that we, the consciousness, hold within us. So basically, we and nobody else builds the creator. The creator is defined as that sum of discernments which we, as the will to receive, are able to attain. Meaning, we not only are the creator, we build it. It doesn't exist without us, without our attainment.
And Rav says that many times, that we build the creator within.
He said that, I heard it many times, but only today did it sink to a new level.
Yes.
What?
I'm saying only today did it sink in.
To a certain level, I'm sure that it's going to get more colors and taste and depth later in the future. But today, I actually felt that we are building it, meaning it felt like I'm collecting discernments and I'm actually building, like in Lego, the creator inside me. It doesn't have anywhere else to exist other than inside me.
Yep. All right, I think we'll stop here and enter the after party.